today's episode of Geography. Why? Today I flew out to southern Egypt to investigate one of the strangest places in Africa, named Bir Tawil. So, for those of you who don't know, Bir Tawil is a 795 square mile area of land between Egypt and Sudan, but neither country owns it. This is a weird dilemma that has been going on for hundreds of years, and people have tried to claim the country. Today we're going to explain its history and why it's still the way it is today. So, here's a map of Africa, and if you zoom in really close, you can see Bir Tawil. And you can also see to its right the Halaib Triangle, which, along with Bir Tawil, used to be an area where tribes lived. In Halaib Triangle, there was a group of Sudanese tribes, and in Bir Tawil, there used to be Egyptian tribes. Hi, hope you're enjoying the show, but I'll be back to you right after the break.
The greatest game ever made.
You could count how many sesame seeds there are on top of the hot and deliciously juicy quarter pounder. Or you could just eat them. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
We're on here? Oh, okay. Hello. So, it's time to answer the big question. Why is Bir Tawil this way? Well, really it all chalks down to borders. The only other unclaimed piece of land is Mary Bird Land in Antarctica. And it's pretty self-explanatory why nobody wants that one. It's because it's in Antarctica, and it's cold, and it's just an icy wasteland. But you would think Bir Tawil, a place that's in Africa where humanity started, would have been claimed by someone by now. But, again, like I said, it's all to do with the borders. To fully understand why Bir Tawil is like this, we have to go back to the early 19th century, when Egypt was ruled by the Ottomans. Now, the Ottomans technically ruled Egypt, but they didn't enforce anything about them owning the country. So, really, the Egyptians were just doing their own thing. And Egypt just thought, we should invade Sudan, because Sudan had good relations with other countries, and they just wanted to own Sudan. So, they invaded Sudan, and for a while nothing really happened. They technically had rulership over Sudan, and that was it. They were all happy. There was no more angry relations or anything. No one was angry at anyone. Until the 1870s, 1872 to be exact. Hey, how did nobody do anything about this? Why isn't our government doing anything about you owning us for, like, 60 years? Now, while all this was going on, the British started taking interest in Egypt. Now, they did not know about the Sudanese rebellion that was going on at the time, but all they cared about was the Suez Canal had finished being built in Egypt. So, they were like, that's pretty neat, so we can import our things to India now, and we can do it faster, and we can do it more efficiently. So, we should start being friends with Egypt, because that would be kind of cool. And then, they had this really weird plan. Let's go over to Egypt and be like, yeah, we kind of own this now. So, after the British people caught wind of what was going on, they decided to walk down to Sudan and try to stop whatever was going on, try to stop the rebellion. But what actually ended up happening was an 18-year-long war between the Egyptians and the Sudanese. So, as you might have guessed, the Egyptians and the British won the war, and afterwards the British decided to set a border once and for all between Egypt and Sudan. But there was one problem with this. They came up with this intricate, completely elaborate and fair border where they just put a straight line through the entire thing. And obviously this made everyone angry, because now there are Sudanese people living in parts that are actually in Egypt now, and now there are Egyptian people who are living in Sudan all of a sudden. So, just a few years later, after everyone got angry and was like, that's not fair, they decided to revise it, and they came up with a zigzaggy line. I'll have a picture of it. It's right here. This is the zigzaggy line they came up with. Now, they were kind of happy with this, and they were like, yeah, that's cool, because now we're all in our respective countries. But then, in the 1950s, colonialism, which is what like all of this stuff was, where Britain owned all these countries, people started being like, that's not fair. We should stop that. So now, Egypt and Sudan were just their own countries now. They were independent, and they were like, oh, that's really weird. We're our own country now. What about this border? So, now that they were freshly independent, when they had to choose their borders, they were given two options. For Egypt, one of them was the old border, where they had the Halaib, and they didn't have Bir Tawil. Sudan had Bir Tawil. Or they could pick the newer one, which was the opposite of that. And then Sudan's options were just the opposite of that. And because Halaib is much bigger, they were both like, yeah, let's both choose the Halaib. For decades, they just kind of shared Halaib Triangle. But in 1992, oil was discovered off the coast of the Halaib Triangle. And Egypt and Sudan didn't really want to share this oil because it could be really, really, really valuable. So because of all this tension and fighting, Sudan eventually removed all their troops and all of their people from the Halaib Triangle and kind of left Egypt to it. They owned it now. And because of all this, Bir Tawil was left out. And that's why it's still the lonely place it is today. The lawless wasteland. Nobody lives there. There are no laws, no rules, no infrastructure, no development, nothing. Just a big desert